Right. Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here for another session with all of you. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Tanner. I am a YNPN Phx board member and treasurer, and I'm also the moderator for this fantastic session, pivoting in a time of need, which I'm sure many of us are feeling. In this session, Lynita Johnson will be talking about and sharing how to adjust all of your communications during a crisis. Again, something very timely and resonant. She's got a fantastic background. I love how she starts off her biography. She is a good vibe enthusiast and ginger beer devotee, same here, fantastic, who enjoys complex problem solving and a grand adventure, which 2020 has definitely been. She's a seasoned brand strategist and marketing communications pro, and she works hard at connecting with people, especially locally owned businesses and communities, to build a diverse, inclusive, and prosperous Arizona. So this is going to be the last session of the day, so we want it to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to ask questions as we go. She's going to be focusing on 4 areas, and for each of the areas as we go, we're going to pick about 2 to 3 questions to answer. So feel free to make sure you use the chat bar. Please know all of your videos are going to be hidden. Make sure that you're muted as well, but you can unmute yourself at any time. So without further ado, here is Lynita. Very excited for this presentation.
Thank you for the awesome introduction, Tanner. Let me go ahead and share my screen here so you all can see. All right, so can everyone see the presentation okay, Tanner?
Looking good.
All right, great. So as Tanner alluded to, we are all in a very interesting and dynamic time right now. And in addition to the typical challenges that we address through our nonprofits, we are now faced with much grander global issues that are happening right now. So while this presentation was crafted with the COVID pandemic in mind, it is relevant to any challenge that might come up and can really help clarify. So as we get started, I wanted us to all have the same working understanding as nonprofits as we have this conversation. It's a term that's used widely with varying definitions. So for today's presentation, we're just going to use this definition here from the National Council of Nonprofits. So by definition, nonprofits are there for people during their most stressful and difficult times. And right now, in addition to whatever your nonprofit's area of focus might be, there are grander themes that your constituents might be dealing with. So it's important for us to have clarity as we move forward to help our target audiences, not only with our primary focus as individual organizations, but also in balancing the weight of the grander issues that are going on in the world. So in doing that, I really recommend 4 focus areas, and this is what Tanner had mentioned earlier. There's these 4 focus areas that are really key in identifying the foundation for any strategic communication, and it's even more important in a time of crisis. Those areas are who we are, who we serve, what we do, and how we do it. And that seems pretty simple and straightforward, but when you're wanting to help people who are going through so much, it can be difficult to make decisions on what to include and when. So I always recommend taking a step back before you really start identifying what your crisis communications plan is or any strategic communications plan. It's important to outline what your foundation is as an organization and how you've been implementing that foundation. So this can be done as pre-work to any planning meetings. I like to share it out to the leadership team or the action committee to be thinking about this through their individual lenses and then coming to the table with ideas and recommendations in a working session where you leave with the actual consensus on what the communications plan is going to be moving forward and who will be responsible for which portions and tactics of that plan. So part of that, taking a step back, is taking a really high level inventory of what work your organization has done over the past 6 to 12 months. You want to keep in mind strengths, weaknesses, challenges, opportunities. You also want to make note of any big wins or lessons learned and make sure you're pulling that through to inform the work moving forward for the organization and specifically in the time of need. Before we dive into this first focus area, are there any questions that you have so far? Okay, then I'm going to keep going. So the first focus area is who we are. And this really gets at the heart and soul of what defines your organization. It's the mission, vision, and values, but it's also looking at what your key differentiators are. Are there other organizations that do similar work? And if so, how does your organization stand apart from those potential collaborators in the space? Also be sure to capture the style and personality of your organization. If in the past your organization has been warm and welcoming and friendly, that tone needs to carry through in this time of crisis. If you've always been a little bit of a rebel rouser and your organization pushes the boundaries and is vocal and bold, that should also pull through. Keeping in mind you want to modify that for the climate that you're in. So the intensity of these components might change, but the foundation remains the same. Tanner, do we have any questions?
Not yet. I'm keeping an eye out.
Okay, just let me know when you see one, and I'll take a pause and we can answer some specific questions. So once you've identified who the organization is, you'll dive into who the organization serves. So this is your target audiences, but it also can grow during a time of crisis. So you'll want to start with your existing audiences and the people that engage with you on a daily or reoccurring basis. But you also want to look at what new audiences might find your organization because of the crisis at hand. For Local First Arizona, we do a lot of work with smaller businesses independently owned in Arizona, connecting them with consumers. And with the COVID pandemic, there was a heightened awareness of how spending locally can impact the community and the support needed for these small businesses. So we really saw a vast growth in the consumers who were turning to our page, as well as businesses in rural communities looking for resources. And we had to make that pivot to share resources out to those audiences to help them through. And then the third point here is also think about, specifically in a time of crisis or need, think about who has the influence to make significant and impactful changes to the system who oversees the specific area of need. And that can become a much higher priority on your target list during a time of crisis. So I see we got a question here for the Who We Are focus. And that question is, what would you say for an organization that recently changed and mission focused pretty dramatically?
Add a little context if you'd like.
That would be great.
I have a very good friend of mine who wanted to make this section actually, and she asked me to ask this question. Project Cure, who used to do international distribution of medical goods, now exclusively works domestically, distributing medical goods to American hospitals. So for them, it was a huge shift in messaging and imagery in their website communications. Everything changed like overnight. And they're not even allowed to send materials out of country. So for them, their identity has been really tough to really nail down again what it is.
And that the impetus for that change was the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes.
So in those situations, I think it's important to be authentic and as transparent as possible in why the decision was made, without knowing the specifics of that industry and making a few assumptions. I imagine that a lot of that was guided by shipping embargoes and requirements that were put in place by the government and things that they don't have control over. So without placing blame, I think it's important to educate why that change was made and then how that change positively impacts their consumer or customer base. And then taking it a step further and finding a solution for the challenges that might be created from that shift. If they have customers who are international and were relying on them for products previously, finding like-minded organizations around the world who can fill that need could be a needed resource for those past customers. So you really have to kind of take a look at how does that pivot in or change in the mission and focus for your organization impact your audience, your consumers. What challenges does it bring up and what demands does it create, and then be resourceful in pulling solutions together that either your organization can offer out themselves or referrals they can make to others to fill that need. Do you think your friend will find that useful, Tanner? Is there more I can add?
No, I think that's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I think, well, one thing that might be interesting too would be for you know, how do you work with staff members whose passion might have been really helping third world countries? Because I know that, you know, just as your donors or stakeholders or clients, sometimes your employees will struggle with a change in purpose.
That's a really important point to make, Tanner. I think giving those employees the opportunity to leverage that passion in a way to resolve those challenges that you might identify. So, you know, if this specific organization that did a lot of work in the third world countries, maybe that employee could be head of the task force or communications team for sharing out resources and connecting those customers to companies that can meet those needs right now, or engaging that passion in other ways through either organization-backed volunteer work or sharing resources through the various channels that organization has. I see Vashi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, asks, how can you identify new audiences that may find you during a time of crisis? That's a great question. If you are using social media or email marketing, typically the platforms will offer you some insight on where your viewers and followers are coming from. There are some free to very affordable tools out there that can also help. Sendable is one that I use and really enjoy. You can put in some keywords it'll monitor to help you identify that. You can also do a simple excuse me, a simple survey. If your audience is really engaged on social media, you can do a post and just ask people to shout out where they're from and what they are experiencing during the time of crisis and what resources they are looking for in support of the challenges they're seeing. And that can really inform the message moving forward. All right, so those were really great questions. Thank you all for providing those. And I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the third step. So you've taken a step back, you've identified your organization's foundation and what the organization represents. And you've now looked at who the organization serves. The next step is, what does the organization do? Now, this goes beyond the mission and vision and values and gets into the real tactical components of the organization's work. And so you want to look at how the organization lives and breathes those concepts in its programs, services, messaging, and actions. So if you are a organization like Local First Arizona that provides business education, inclusive across the state, we took a look back and said, okay, what do we offer? We do webinars, we do in-person conferences, we share resources, we connect businesses in need with different organizations that speak specifically to a more specified area of expertise. And how do we apply that in this current time? What does that look like in this current time? We also took a look at how our organization makes decisions on where we're going to engage and when. And that's really important in a time like this, when there are so many things going on and so many areas of need. This is really critical in identifying how your organization is best suited to support your target audiences and help them find the resources they need to get them through. And then lastly, you want to look at what your target audience wants or needs. Now, this is important because a lot of times as passionate employees of a nonprofit, we have a very clear idea of what we should be doing or where we should be going next. That doesn't always line up with what our audience actually wants or needs. And it serves no one any good if we as an organization are investing our time creating products and resources that our target audiences don't want or need. So this really is a critical point in that organizational funnel to help zoom in on what should be the main areas of focus and where you should invest time and energy in supporting your target audience. And lastly, how we do it. And I think this is one that is the most challenging for a lot of nonprofits and communications teams. There are so many platforms available to us right now, from social media to email marketing, websites, direct communication, video conferencing and calling. You don't have to be everywhere and you don't have to be everything to everyone. Identify where your skills are best suited to serve your audience. Identify strategic partners that can help carry the burden in the areas that aren't within the scope or capacity of your organization. And then also look at where your audience is at and meet them there. If your audience does not use social media, there is no point in having 5 social media accounts. If you get really good engagement on your website and your email platforms, that's where you should be focusing your message. That's where you'll have the highest impact as you look to pull that forward and meet your audience during their time of need. Lastly, well, not lastly, but 2 key points here are: look at the relationships you have and figure out how you can leverage them to help do your work. If you have volunteers, if you have board of directors, if you are really engaged with sister, brother, partner organizations, see what resources they have available, what expertise they have, and see if you can leverage them to get the resources you need to your target audience. And then also ask for help for tactical execution. If you need to update your website and you don't have a web developer on your team, reach out to your volunteers and see if you have anyone who does that professionally and could volunteer their services. You never know what skills you have access to until you ask the questions. And typically in a time of crisis or need, people are really activated to engage with causes they care about and are empowered to offer what they can to help. And so that can really help amplify the capacity and expertise available through your organization. I see Liz Salazar here asked a question. She says, some nonprofits don't live and breathe their values mission, which shows up everywhere, including communications. They start to live and breathe for making sure they just continue to exist rather than addressing the reason why they exist. That is a really good point. And to that end, that's why I always recommend doing that 6 to 12 month audit, because sometimes the work you're doing or the work that's needed by your constituents in the past year isn't exactly what the mission and values outline. I think there's 2 points to consider when that's the case. One is that a long-standing issue, and is it time for an update to the mission, vision, values? And 2, is this a pivot that's been made because of this specific crisis, and was it internally driven by the leadership team, or was it driven by the target audience? And if the pivot was made to address challenges and needs of the target audience, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If what is being seen is more of a separation or a scope creep to the mission and values, that's a bigger issue that needs to be addressed. So we're right up at about 25 minutes in the presentation. I wanted to leave plenty of time to answer specific questions that you guys might want to ask. I know we had a few throughout the presentation as we went, but I wanted to open this up now to the audience to ask more specific questions. Okay, so Julie asked, I have trouble telling the difference between when I need to drop a platform and if I'm under investing in that platform, and it could really open us up to more visibility. Julie, would you mind turning on your mic so I can ask you a few follow-up questions?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you.
Absolutely. So is there one platform in mind, or is this more of just a broad question on how to look at your analytics and make those decisions?
It's both broad and specific because I feel like I've been in both situations where I'm trying to
Okay.
decide, am I trying to do too many things at once or am I really just not working with one well enough? But also, one example that keeps coming up for my current organization is LinkedIn. We know it could be really
Mhm.
helpful, especially in building mentors for a lot of our programs, but it's not one I've really had a lot of success in building up, but I think also it's the one I post on the least. So is it
Yeah,
me or is it LinkedIn? I don't know.
for sure. And can you tell me a little bit about your current organization?
Sure. I work at SARSF, and we are a science education nonprofit that runs one of the largest science fairs in the world. So sometimes that means connecting with professionals that can judge uh, science projects, but also serve as mentors to students. And that's really
Hmm.
where I see LinkedIn potentially being helpful. But
Okay.
it's not one I've really been able to get off the ground with, especially since when I need it is so specific to a certain time of year.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you, and that's a challenge that I think many marketers and communications professionals have faced. Um, so for the broader kind of analysis and looking at if it's a platform that makes sense at your organization, I would recommend tracking at minimum followers and engagement on each of your profiles monthly. And you can go back and look for, a couple of months, but I would say start now and keep an eye on that for the next 3 to 4 months. And then at the same time, look at how you can leverage content that you're already putting out on other channels to up your posting frequency on LinkedIn, and see how that changes as you're posting more relevant content to the platform. If you see an increase in engagement um, and an increase in followers, I would say it'd be worth investing a little time to build that up. LinkedIn, because it is so specific to professionals in the space, is one of is this guy is pros and cons. It can be if you're generating very dynamic content that engages a specific audience, you can see the numbers move pretty swiftly there. If you are in a position where you're stretching to either generate that content or find an audience that is interested in content, is probably not the best platform, because it can be a real struggle to get followers up there. Um, Based on what you told me, though, it seems like your organization's area of focus is broad enough that there should be a decent audience on that platform. If you have access to any dollars to promote social media, LinkedIn is one where it does go a long way. So you could really tailor to specific um, industries or job titles to get that messaging in front of people for 4 to 6 weeks. And then once you have your audience build up, you should see your engagement increase there. As far as looking at platforms and identifying when it's time to say farewell to a platform, I like to look at least a year's worth of data when you're actively engaging it. That being said, if you get into the year and you're 4 months in and it's an absolute struggle to generate content for that platform, it's time to let it go. That's enough evidence in and of itself. You shouldn't have to, it shouldn't be, it's hard enough to manage the platforms and create engagement where your audience is at. If you're fighting on both ends as far as generating content and getting people to pay attention to it, you could be investing your time somewhere where you would get a higher return. Does that answer your question, Julie?
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dempsey asked, how would you choose to develop software or systems when some staff volunteers aren't tech savvy at all? Yeah, that's the struggle. I think it's important to really identify where your staff and volunteers are, and how you would be using the tools or software to meet a need. Is Dempsey, would you mind telling me, is this in reference to, are you trying to communicate resources out or manage resources within those groups?
Right now, we have a volunteer helping with our tracking our individual volunteers, and the process that they are using now is just very bad. But the spreadsheet that they're working with and sending back and forth she said it was too much data entry for her. So I'm trying to figure out what would not be too much data entry.
Too much data. And what type of information is it? Like where volunteers will be at specific times and dates, or is it contact information in areas of interest?
Yeah, I'm still figuring out all the parts, but it's their application process. So starting from when they're submitted and ending at if they are accepted to a program or rejected.
Gotcha. And right now is the application a digital process, or is it a email process or a written application?
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Sounds like you have a fun task at hand. I think one of the my area of focus to start on that project would really be a centralized point for the applications. I think that would help the volunteer drastically if at least the information was all coming through the same portal, whatever that portal might be. There are some great free platforms available out there that you could use. Google actually offers a form option where you could create the application and it would automatically transfer the information from the application into an Excel document. So that might help the volunteer with the data entry piece of it. They would still be responsible for, managing and storing it, but they wouldn't have to type all the information into the cells at that point. When I'm faced with a challenge like that, one of the first things I like to do is just do a little research to see what's out there. You'll be surprised. A lot of the tech tools offer nonprofit rates and have really great resources for training volunteers or staff members on how to use them. So that could also be a huge help. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay, Julie asked if I can talk a little bit about how we fit press releases into our plan. We are stingy with press releases, I think is the best way to describe it. Typically, press releases require a decent amount of work to pull the information together and then get them routed and vetted for approval by all the stakeholders who are involved. So unless it's something that's got a high media value or interest to it, or is a very bold or some type of announcement that really stands out in the space, we don't do press releases. That being said, we do a lot of tailored pitches to media. So if it's something that might be of interest, but it doesn't necessarily require the 8 hours to, get the press release written and vetted and approved before it goes out, we'll just draft an email with the specifics and send it to the relevant media contact. Things as examples that we send press releases for, if we have if we're announcing details or participants in a major event, we'll send a press release to the target audience. If we are doing a major campaign or initiative that impacts the community at large, we'll do a press release. We just, as COVID hit, launched a small business relief fund where we were seeking donations from larger businesses to help micro entrepreneurs, and then also accepting applications for this grant to help people make it through until the Small Business Administration figured out what they were doing. So that was something that we did, put together a press release and get it out, because that was the best way to get all of the information out to the largest number of interested parties at the same time. We then add our press releases to our websites as blog content with some slight modifications so we can reference it in our social media posts and continue to drive traffic to it over time. All right. Brandy asked, oh, this is a note. Brandy said you can also request assistance from GoDaddy. They donate resources and training to nonprofits. I believe that was in reference to Dempsey's question on developing software systems to help staff. I see some familiar names here. Hi, Jen and Heidi and Kate. And I think I saw Jacqueline earlier as well. Okay. Let's see, we have one new message here. Oh, just Heidi. Well, Tanner, I don't see many more questions coming through. I'm available. I'll put my email information in here, and if you think of any questions after the fact or want to follow up, please do so. I shared the slides with Megan, so I think those will be shared out in the post-conference communications for you all. That's all I have.
Great. Well, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, we will make sure that we get the slides out, and a recording of this will also be available to everybody who's attending. So we're super excited to share that. Thank you so much, Lynita, for sharing everything with us. That was great.
Absolutely. Glad I could be of help. And like I said, if you guys now or in the future come across a challenge as you're trying to navigate a strategic plan or communications approach, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you so much. So for those of you who don't know, our last speaker of the day for our session that was supposed to be about why your why is more important than ever had a family emergency and can't present. So the nice part is it'll give us a little bit more time to chat and get to know some of the people that we've all been silently in the same room with all day today. We're going to take a break until 4 p.m. and then we're going to have some closing remarks from Julie, our wonderful YNPN board president. And she's going to close out the session, and then we're going to jump into happy hour. So get your cocktails ready. If you're able to, those working from home, do it. It'll be fun. So we'll all see you again at 4 o'clock for closing and then happy hour. So thank you all so much for attending. We really appreciate it.